We plant the food. We drive the cab. We load the ship. We run the lab. We build the bridges. We fly the plane.
Good evening and welcome to Voices from the Village. I'm Louis Lafortune. Tonight our show is entitled On the Ballot, November 6th. We have a big election coming up this year, nationwide and here in California. California voters, as you know, have the opportunity to vote on measures that are initiated by the public. This is not true in every state, but we have that here. It's a legacy of the progressive era about 100 years ago. We have 11 ballot propositions this year on the California state ballot. We'll be looking at several of those. And the first two we're going to look at are Propositions 30. Well, let's just start with one, Proposition 30. And my guest tonight to talk about that is Wanda Conaway-Knight. Welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Would you introduce yourself? Who are you? What kind of work do you do? And why are you working on these two ballot propositions?
I am an in-home support care provider with the SEIU union, and it's very important to my job to keep it so we won't have budget cuts and to keep people in home.
Okay, so what would Proposition 30 do? What is the language? What does it say?
It said it will prevent cuts to schools and public safety and help balance the budget by asking the richest Californians to pay their fair share.
Okay, so as I understand it, the state income tax here in California is rather flat. That is, it taxes workers like you and me at the same rate as wealthy people.
Yes, that's true.
So Prop 30 would increase the taxes on wealthy people.
Yeah, people making over $250,000, single people and couples making over $500,000.
Okay, great. The California, my union, the CFT, the California Federation of Teachers, came up with a ballot proposition much earlier this year, and it was called the millionaires tax, and it would have taxed only millionaires, so this is a little bit different. But they made a terrific video, and it gets the point, I want to show that now, it gets the point across about how wealthy some people are and how little tax they paid compared to the amount of income they have. And our poster child in this video is none other than Kim Kardashian. So the video is called Tax Kim K, and we're gonna watch that right now.
Being on TV has changed my life because I get lots of free stuff.
I just want to remind everyone that video was made for a campaign that is no longer happening. The millionaires tax morphed into the present Measure K Proposition 30 in a deal that was made between the California Federation of Teachers and Governor Brown. But the message is basically the same, is that wealthy people like Kim don't pay the same rate of tax that we do. And that's a problem. She could pay a lot more. So we're going to try to earn, how much money would this raise if it were enacted?
It would $6 billion.
$6 billion annually.
Yeah, annually to help schools, smaller classes, up-to-date textbooks, and rehiring teachers.
Okay.
You know.
And so we're going to have an additional income tax on people making over $250,000. And there's another portion of that. What?
Is that is it a 1/4% tax on our sales tax that we would have to pay?
Yes, I think you have that right. The quarter state sales tax, California state sales tax, would go up by 1/4%. And this has a sunset, right? This is not permanent.
No, it's 5 years.
5 years. And then the rich people are off the hook, I guess.
I hope not. I hope that there come a new ballot or proposition to try to make it go longer or increase it. Because I feel like the worker bee or the worker ant, that I do all the work and the queen gets all the money and the rewards, you know.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, no, and that's, and again, the original millionaire's tax from the teachers union was a permanent tax, and it was a much higher threshold so that people making less than $1 million would not be affected. It was a true millionaire's tax. No sales tax, so it was better. But this is going to be very helpful to $6 billion a year is no small amount of money, and it's going to help a lot, as you said, with providing basic services. Is there anything else you'd like to add about Prop 30?
Well, I just feel that people making over $250,000, $500,000, $1,000 should pay their fair share, because I know I do. And I've been working at this job for 4 years, and I pay my taxes, and it's just really unfair.
Okay, all right. We have another measure we're going to be talking about here, and I see your button combines the two, and your button is from SEIU.
Yes, it is. Your
union, Service Employees International Union. Yes on 30 and no on 32, and they're combined. So can you briefly lay out what is Prop 32 about, and why are you opposed to that one?
Well, Prop 32 is like stopping special interests, and what it is that they're trying to say that I voluntarily give money out of my paycheck to CORE, which is like a political aspect of the union, so I could have a voice up in Sacramento, so I could have negotiations about my wages, my hours, and my benefits. And what this proposition is trying to do is they're trying to say that I can't pay, they can't take it out of my paycheck, but this is voluntarily. Nobody's making me do it, and I can stop it anytime I want to. So this is trying to take the voice away.
Yeah, so as I've mentioned, I'm also a union member, and this has been a hot topic at my union meetings. So the COPE funds, this Committee on Political Education, COPE, right, is voluntary.
Yes, it is.
Yes, and I pay into my COPE fund for my union, but I don't have to.
Yeah.
And that money is earmarked for, well, political education. That's what it's for. So this would take that away?
Yeah, this would take it away. And to me, that's going against my Constitution, because it's my choice to give, and I give it freely, and I can stop it anytime I want to. And they want to stop it so they could have more political clout up in Sacramento. And so it's like what happened in, is it Wisconsin? So I have no bargaining power to say about my wages, about my hours, my working conditions.
So we have a couple of videos. I'm going to show these right now. The no on 32, which is the position that Wanda is representing and which the unions are backing. And then the supporters of 32. So we have two videos. We're going to run these back to back. The first one is no on 32, and then followed by yes on 32.
Working families are wondering about Proposition 32, the so-called Stop Special Interest Money Act, and what it means to us. The answer is simple. It gives more power to the biggest billionaires and super PACs who are already swallowing up our elections, and silences the voices of middle-class working families and unions.
That's why Proposition 32 is really the Special Exemptions Act, a carefully written ballot initiative designed to create more special exemptions for billionaires to take over our political system and rig our elections. Just look who wins if Proposition 32 passes.
The same corporations that OpenSecrets.org says already spend 15 times as much as labor unions on elections. The super PACs, Wall Street firms and hedge funds, real estate developers, and insurance companies. They all get a special exemption under Proposition 32, preserving their ability to create political front groups and spend unlimited money hijacking our campaigns.
It's why a respected columnist for the Los Angeles Times has written that Proposition 32 would just expand unaccountable independent expenditure committees and the super PACs. And what happens to us if Proposition 32 passes?
Every day, working families lose. The president of CTA says it's not a balanced approach, it's just the opposite. Proposition 32 unfairly singles out and limits the voices of our teachers, nurses, and public safety officials across the state. The president of California Professional Firefighters says, and we lose because our voices are targeted and silenced by unfair provisions in the Special Exemptions Act. It would stop unions from collecting or receiving political funds through voluntary payroll deductions.
So teachers will lose their voice, the voices they use to fight the budget cuts that continue to devastate our schools and colleges. Nurses lose, and so do the patients they care for. Local police and firefighters lose their voice in their efforts to keep every California community safe.
We lose on issues like the minimum wage, while Sacramento keeps giving unfair corporate tax giveaways to the big corporations and billionaires.
Proposition 32 takes away the ability of everyday heroes to speak out on issues that matter to us all: quality schools and healthcare, public safety, homeowner rights, and consumer protections.
And it's why the League of Women Voters, Common Cause, and the California Clean Money Campaign have joined a coalition of labor organizations in opposition to this unbalanced proposition, because it fails to solve Sacramento's problems.
So stand up to Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association, the Lincoln Club of Orange County, and the greediest corporate special interests, and join the millions of working families in stopping the Special Exemptions Act. Vote no on Prop 32.
Take action now. Log on and learn more at votenoon32.com. We can't afford to wait.
Gloria Romero for yes on Proposition 32.
I'm Gloria Romero, teacher and former legislator. I was a teacher who ran for office because I believed in public service. I worked hard to give every child in California a chance to get a great education. But I learned something as majority leader in the Senate. The big moneyed special interests don't want the change we need, and these special interests will spend millions of dollars to stop it. Ask yourself, if we have known for years that our schools are failing, why hasn't someone done something about it? It's gotten so bad that just this year, the special interests killed a bill that would have sensibly streamlined how school districts fire child molesters and drug users. The worst part is that the legislators who were supposed to vote simply seem too afraid to. Newspaper editorial boards saw this and called it for what it was: cynical political manipulation. The San Francisco Chronicle called it sickening. I'm fighting back, so should you. Don't be fooled. Special interests want to keep control of the politicians in Sacramento, and Proposition 32 prevents that. If you want to take back California from the special interests, if you want to get big money out of California politics, if you want elected officials to answer to the people again, whatever your political persuasion, join me in voting yes on Proposition 32.
Vote yes on Proposition 32. Take the big money out of California politics.
Two videos, yes on, no on 32, we saw first, and we're not there yet. Okay, two videos. No on 32, and we saw first, and then yes on 32. So the first one, so you'll know, was produced by the California Labor Federation, which is a coalition of labor unions in California. And as you said, Wanda, the big problem with it is that it would
Take away our voice.
take away our voice
Yeah.
by
No
eliminating the union's ability to collect voluntary contributions from their members.
Yeah.
Okay. The yes on 32 people, and that's Gloria Romero, former state senator. I was surprised to see her doing this, but she's a Democrat. She's concerned about special interest money. Well, as they pointed out in the first one, the corporate spending as compared to union spending is 15-1. So the advantage is enormous. And they want to make that even worse. I just have to comment, I happen to know that Anthony Villaraigosa, who's the mayor of Los Angeles, he's quoted in that Yes on 32 video. He is very upset with the campaign because he has disavowed that. He said, I never said that. So he's saying, no, you can't use my name in your ads. There's a fight going on there between Villaraigosa and the Yes on 32 people. Just a little background there. So again, we saw the arguments. You want to wrap this up with just your final thoughts on 30 and 32?
Well, on 30, I do believe that everybody should pay their share fair taxes, especially people who make $250,000 or couples who make $500,000, because I pay my fair share and I don't even make anywhere near that, and I'm all yes on 30. And 32, it's like going against taking away my civil rights or constitutional rights that we fought for all these years, that I won't have a voice to say, no, this is not right. This is, the fight for my wages, my benefits, and the fight for cuts to in-home support for my clients. So I say no on 32.
Okay.
And I'm the phone facilitator at the union, so I'm there from 12 to 8 every Tuesday, calling up members and seeing how they would vote on this and educating them about this and let them have their own decision. And
if people wanted to get involved with it, we have your, I think we do, contact information on the screen there. Do you want to just give that out?
Yeah. My email is wandaknight17@yahoo.com, and I can give my phone number too. It's 408-309-3590, and I live in Brookdale.
And you can be contacted through the union?
I can be contacted through my personal cell phone or through my email.
Okay.
Either way.
All right, great.
In the union too.
And through SEIU Local 521?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. Thank you again, Wanda, for being here tonight. Wanda Conaway-Knight, home healthcare worker with SEIU Local 521. We're going to make a shift in my guests here right now. To facilitate that transition, I'm going to show you a couple of other videos. Our next topic tonight will be Proposition 34, and I think we'll also touch on Propositions 35 and 36. But 34 is the big one that is gaining a lot of attention. It is another attempt in California to repeal the death penalty. This is a trend across the country. Many states in the last few years have banned the death penalty in their own states, including Illinois and Connecticut and New Mexico and several others. California is now set to do that if Prop 34 passes on November 6th. We're going to see two videos, and we're going to bring in two other guests to talk about those videos and to talk about Prop 34. The first video is, of course, Yes on 34, which again would ban the death penalty, and that'll be followed immediately by a No on Prop 34 video. So let's run those now.
Crime victims and their families came to the state capitol today looking for answers and justice for their loved ones. As KCRA3's Mike Lurie shows us tonight, a Sacramento area mother now seeking the ultimate penalty for her son's killer after nearly 16 years.
There's plenty of pain in these pictures. Memories of loved ones struck down before their time. Victims like 8-year-old Michael Lyons of Yuba City, who was walking home from school in May 1996 when he was abducted by a serial killer.
He kidnapped Michael and he kept him for 10 hours and he tortured him during those hours. and murdered him ultimately the next morning.
The convicted killer, Robert Rhodes, is now on death row, where Sandy Friend, Michael's mother, is hoping Rhodes will pay the ultimate price.
If he isn't the poster child for the death penalty, I don't know who would be. I mean, he is the evilest of the evil. He is the worst of the worst.
Evil has affected you in so many profound ways, but justice is also affecting you.
Governor Jerry Brown told the survivors he understands their pain.
I'm standing with you for victims' rights.
Brown did not tip his hand on the controversial ballot measure to repeal the death penalty, vowing only to uphold the will of the people. But if you ask Sandy and other survivors here at this victim rights rally, the death penalty is something they firmly believe in.
I don't think there's any other justice besides that.
California voters will ultimately decide the fate of the death penalty this November. In Sacramento, Mike Lurie, KCRA 3 reports.
I'm Jeannie Woodford. I started at San Quentin State Prison as a correctional officer in 1978, and I stayed at San Quentin, working my way up through the ranks until I became the warden in 1999. As a warden of San Quentin State Prison, it is your role and responsibility to carry out executions, and the state of California has had 13. Of those 13, I carried out 4 executions. California, in my opinion, is ready to replace the death penalty because we now know how costly it is and how ineffective the death penalty is. By putting the initiative on the ballot, we are doing 3 things. We're removing the death penalty and leaving life without possibility of parole as the harshest penalty in the state. We are requiring all inmates serving life without possibility of parole to work and pay restitution. We are also setting aside $100 million over 3 years to a fund called the Safe California Fund. And the goal of that fund is to solve the 46% of homicides that go unsolved in the state each year and the 56% of rapes that go unsolved each year in this state. Cost for people on death row begins with the trial, which is far more expensive than a trial for something other than the death penalty. And then it proceeds through their incarceration by having a legal team and all the legal experts that individuals on death row are allowed to have because they're appealing their case. And then there is the cost of incarceration. The inmates, when they're on death row, they're isolated from the general population. So what that means is you're either bringing the services to the inmate or the inmate to the services, and that requires a lot of staff. The Alarcon-Mitchell report has determined that it costs $184 million more per year to have someone on death row than if they had a sentence of life without possibility of parole. I believe so strongly in this campaign because this initiative ends the death penalty, which we know is so ineffective, and it puts money in place to make our communities, our neighborhoods, and our children safer.
Two videos. The first one we saw was No on 34 from a group that wants to retain the death penalty in California. And the second one, Yes on 34, the video was made by Safe California, and I had the language for that, but it has to do with saving money and
safety, accountability. Force, I don't know.
All right. Anyway, it's an acronym. The point is that they're going to keep California safe by ending the death penalty, but not letting people out of prison. So to talk more about Prop 34, I'd like to introduce our guests right now. Nancy Abbey is a member of the Santa Cruz chapter of WILF, Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, a
Thank you.
venerable
Yes.
organization. And you're also active on this Prop 34 campaign.
I'm a strong supporter of it. I have done some work in the county on it. But
All right, well, thanks for joining us. And my other guest is Attorney Ben Rice. Thanks for being here.
Nice to be here.
And you are in criminal practice here in Santa Cruz County for a couple
About
of decades now?
Almost 30 years, actually.
30 years.
Yes.
All right. So, Ben, why don't you lay it out for us, please? What, if proposition were passed by the voters, what would it do?
Well, the basic idea is that we would no longer sentence people to death in the state of California. And people who've been convicted of these really horrendous crimes would be incarcerated for the rest of their lives. It's life without the possibility of parole. And of course, a lot of people, like many people have been fighting for this and arguing for this for a very long time. And I think that one of the reasons that so many people have really started to pay attention to this in the last few years is because of all the people who've been exonerated, many of whom were on death row around the country because of DNA exonerations. And that has really, I think, focused attention on the problem. And one of the problems here is that innocent people do get convicted of crimes. And the other thing that I think is a huge factor is the amount of money that we are throwing away. Recently, the California Supreme Court recognized that half or more than half of their resources are spent on death penalty cases. And the costs of prosecuting people and then incarcerating them is hundreds of millions of dollars that we don't have. And when you recognize that so many people are convicted because they're poor, and you recognize that some people are convicted despite their actual innocence, and then you have this terrible waste of resources. I think we might be at that point where the voters are ready to end the death penalty in California.
Nancy, Abbey, talk about your support for this. What do you think is that the public needs to know about this?
well, I think the public in general has come to believe that we need to repeal the death penalty. The fear, I think, is that a lot of people who really want to do that have said to me, but life imprisonment, without possibility of parole is a terrible thing. And in fact, I've known some people who said they will not vote for it for that reason, which seems to me kind of mixing up two different things. First, we have to repeal the death penalty. And I wish we could get laws that were just perfect and that always did everything we wanted them to, but I think we have to repeal the death penalty, and then we can work on other prison reform issues.
So the phrase I've heard to describe your position is, I think, we should not let the perfect be the enemy of the good.
I like that.
This is a good thing. It's a step forward. We still have this problem of life in prison, which is, many people make the argument that is cruel punishment.
I would think so. I'm not sure which I'd choose. It just.
So, but going back to what Ben said about the possibility and the certainly the certitude we have now with all this DNA as evidence, with all these exonerations, we know that there must have been some people, some innocent people, who were put to death. So, not killing them today and putting them in prison will at least keep that possibility open. Should new evidence arise.
And I understand that people who are now on death row with appeals their appeals will still be heard in the courts. It's not like they're just going to eliminate those.
The appeals won't go away, but they'll be removed from the California Supreme Court and put in the courts of appeal. And so it'll take a huge load off the California Supreme Court. And one thing that's important to remember, too, is that we have all those DNA exonerations, but for every case where there's DNA that can be tested, there are dozens of cases where there's no DNA and innocent people are convicted. So it really is a big problem. Another, I think, important feature of the proposition is there will be $30 million for the next 3 years taken from the savings from getting rid of the death penalty and applied to look for the actual perpetrators. We have an enormous number of unsolved homicides. Santa Cruz County is roughly 30% over the last 10 years. And in California, there's 1,000 unsolved murders a year. And so that $30 million for 3 years is just going to be directed towards solving unsolved murder and unsolved rape cases. And I think another interesting statistic is of the nearly, 350 or some odd exonerations that have taken place since 1989 from DNA, almost half of those cases, they have found the actual perpetrators. So, you know, I see this in court all the time when we have cases where there is forensic evidence that the state just doesn't have the time to get to them in a timely manner. And I think that if we can really take that money, that savings, and apply it to cases, we'll be a safer community and a safer state.
Another provision of Prop 34 is that those persons found guilty of murder would be required to work while in prison, and their wages would be applied to any victim restitution fines or court orders against them, that is, against the perpetrator. So we have, this seems like a very good idea. You know, if you kill the person, the convicted murderer, innocent or not, if you kill him, they're not able to do anything to help the victim. In this case, they would be able to pay a restitution.
Yeah, I'm sure that's not enough for some victims. I mean, it's hard for us to imagine what it's like to be one of those people. Yes. But it's also makes sense, I think, as a community, as a process, to not let people who've been victimized make decisions like, what do we do with the perpetrators? I remember when Dukakis was running for president, right? He was sunk when a reporter asked him, well, what would you do if Kitty, his wife, was murdered? And he said, oh, well, you know, and everybody got so mad at him because it seemed so unrealistic for him to just talk about, well, there's other ways of dealing with it. I mean, we all have those kinds of emotions that are totally natural, but we shouldn't let those folks with those terrible circumstances make those kinds of decisions, in my view.
And I think there's a very mixed reaction among people the victims' families, too.
That's true.
People have said that they thought that the death of this person was going to, solve things for them or bring a closing to it. And many have said it didn't, and that in fact, it made things even more uncomfortable for them. So I know that there's strong feeling by many people that there are people who should just be put to death. But to me, for us as a society to legislate killing is really barbaric. And that it's just not something that we should be doing.
Yeah, I don't think there's very many civilized countries in the world that continue to use this.
The U.S. is becoming more and more isolated on this. The European Union has banned the death penalty. No country may join the Union if it has a death penalty, so they have to eliminate it before they can join. So we're in, even South Africa with that horrible history of apartheid, they banned it. It's the first thing when the ANC took power. That was one of the first things they did.
We're in strange company. Iran and North Korea.
China, Saudi Arabia, these countries we do not, and they're certainly not democracies, and we don't think of them as very progressive, certainly. So we'll see what happens. I think this is polling pretty well, is what I understand. So we'll see what happens in November. I'd like to also take a little time here. I think we can spend a few minutes on these. There's one that's related. Let's start with that one first. Prop 36, which would repeal 3 strikes. Can you talk about that?
Well, I'd be happy to talk about it. The idea of 3 strikes, of course, was that the people who are the most dangerous in our society would be sent away for life. And from talking to lots and lots of people who voted for it, that was the impression they had, that they were really going after the people who were most dangerous and preying upon everyone else. And that's not what the proposition held. And consequently, we have, my understanding is there's about 3,000 people who have been sent to prison for life in California based on a third strike that was a non-serious felony. And it's important for, I think, your viewers to understand that even folks who were convicted with the so-called serious felonies, oftentimes those were not the violent kinds of felonies that I think people were voting for and thinking about. For example, a serious felony is a residential burglary. And in California, someone can break into a garage that's attached to a home and be charged and convicted and given a strike for a residential burglary, for stealing a bicycle out of a garage. The proposition would do away with that result and would say that only people who get a third strike that is a violent felony could get life in prison. And they would then go back to look at all of the people, those 8,000 people that have been sentenced that way with a nonviolent felony, and review them and have a judge review them and see if the people really represent a danger or whether they should be allowed to parole. So obviously I'm a big fan of that. I think that one of the problems with the three strikes has been it puts all the power, virtually all the power, in the hands of prosecutors, and has removed a lot of the discretion that judges historically were able to exercise. And I think that's created problems. And every county has a different district attorney with different philosophies, and some are pretty draconian in their approaches to this stuff.
So if under Prop 36, if it were to be approved, approximately 3,000 convicted felons who are currently serving life terms under this three strikes law, whose third strike conviction was a nonviolent crime, will be able to petition the court for a new reduced sentence. And they're predicting savings of $150 to $200 million a year. So this would benefit the state. Also, we had recently had this Supreme Court decision that a couple of years ago, ordered the reduction of the prison population in California.
That's right.
Because the overcrowding and the poor health, inmates dying in prison from lack of health care. And so we had this prison realignment, so-called. And so this would also reduce pressure on the prisons.
Yeah, no, it's very important. Actually, the U.S. Supreme Court said that our system in California was unconstitutional because it was causing needless deaths, and the violence in our state prisons is really quite terrible. So that was an important decision. Craig Haney from the university here was a really extremely important witness in those hearings and educating the justices about the conditions here. But so I think I misspoke. I said 8,000, but you're right, Louis. It's 3,000 people who will have their sentences reviewed, and that'll take some of the pressure off in our prisons.
We have another minute or two before we get to our third topic tonight, and we have a very controversial, and I know you wanted to talk about this, Nancy, a very controversial measure on the ballot. It's Proposition 35. The title is Californians Against Sexual Exploitation Act, the CASE Act, C-A-S-E, and it is being described as a ban on human trafficking and sex slavery. So okay, that sounds pretty straightforward. Nobody supports human trafficking and sex slavery. But there's a controversy about this.
Well, when I first saw this, I was yes, and then some very wise people pointed out to me that it may be a flawed law. And thinking about 36, we do these things in these propositions sometimes of passing a law that sounds so right, and then finding out that it isn't. And I don't know how I'm going to vote on this. I haven't decided. I just think it needs more exploration and more thought by people before they come down one way or the other. One of the major issues for me would be that it really expands the number of people who would be considered, the definition of human trafficking is expanded. And so therefore, there would be more people who would be labeled as sexual, I keep wanting to say predators, but I don't mean predators.
Traffickers.
Traffickers.
Yeah.
Well, not traffickers, but
Sex offenders?
Sex offenders. And so as sex offenders, they would have to register. They would be under the same onus that people who have done had really deviant sexual behavior. And I think that is something we need to be really careful about. I just really don't like the idea of adding more people to that list and having that follow these people all their lives, when it may not be, it may not be a serious offense.
So, yeah,
I'm on the fence.
Looking at it, I saw a chart in it, and the analysis was that the main effect of this proposition 35, if it were passed, would be to increase penalties.
Yeah.
And it's going from 6 months or a year or whatever for some of these offenses to, I don't think any of them was that light, actually. Everything it covers, by the way, is already a crime in California.
Yes.
Pimping and procuring, they're the terms we use,
Right.
and other enslavement of people, forced labor, all those things are already criminal acts. So it would it would severely increase the punishment.
And it would label them in a different way, which I think, unless I'm mistaken, I think would be really detrimental to their lives and any change in their life.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I had the same kind of reaction when I first heard about it and read about it. I thought, oh, that makes sense to me. But then once I started looking at it, I came up to the same conclusion, that it's cast too wide of a net. Some of the aspects that I'm particularly unhappy with say that, for example, the consent by a victim of human trafficking who is a minor at the time of the commission of the offense is not a defense to a criminal prosecution. So unfortunately, as I said, I've been doing this 30 years, and I've met some very sophisticated 17-year-olds, and that's a terrible thing, but it's true. There are young people who are, for a variety of reasons, very mature at 16 and 17 and 18, and if the defense is not allowed to bring in some of that history, then the jury doesn't know anything about it, and it can be completely unfair in some circumstances. And the mistake of fact as to the age of the victim is not a defense either. The defendant can't even say, hey, I'm 18 and she told me she was 19. That's not permitted to be used as a defense. Those are just two aspects of it that I saw this afternoon when you asked me to look at it that I found troubling. And I think that, again, it's taking some of the discretion away from our judges, and just, it's just too wide of a net.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to leave it there. I want to leave sufficient time for, unless you have a closing.
40?
Huh?
40, you probably?
Oh, 40. Real quick. About 40. What is that?
I just want people to be clear that 40, a vote yes on 40 keeps the redistricting, the Senate redistricting, as it was done by the Citizens Commission. It's such a confusing, it's written in such a confusing way that a lot of people who really want to keep that are saying they're going to vote no on it. So
I'm glad you brought that up. That's important.
So a word of caution, and that would be a good word of caution for all these ballot propositions. Read them carefully, understand what your vote means, because sometimes you think you're voting for one thing and you're not, and you're getting something else. So I want to thank Ben Rice and Nancy Abbey for joining me here on these three propositions, 34, 5, and 6, and 40. And we're going to now show a couple of videos while we allow our guests to leave and bring in our third guest. And our third, and to cover your escape, we're going to show a couple of videos. The videos are about our next topic, which is Proposition 37, which would require the mandatory labeling of genetically engineered food in California. We're going to see two videos. The first one is very short, 30 seconds. It's a yes on 37. And then we have a 1.5 minute, so a total of 2 minutes video, no on 37, for the people who don't want these things labeled. So again, thank you for coming, and let's roll those videos and change our cast again.
Doctors in all parts of the country were asked, "What cigarette do you smoke, doctor?" See how mild and good tasting a cigarette can be.
DDT. Used right, it is absolutely harmless to humans and animals.
The herbicide will open up ground areas.
One of the questions that comes out about GMO foods, crops improved by biotechnology, is there a safety issue? And this has been something that's been scrutinized for the 16 years that they've been commercial on a large scale, and actually long before that. And the basic scientific consensus is they really haven't found any reason to consider biotech improved crops any less safe than crops improved by any other method. And this isn't just a conclusion in the US, this is the same conclusion that's been reached, for instance, by regulators in Europe and the scientific panels that advise them. It's just that in Europe, politics trumps science, and so that isn't particularly something we'd like here. If after all of this time, and a lot of this is research conducted by people who are actively looking for problems, if we actually had found problems, the solution wouldn't be to be labeling biotech crops in one state. The solution would be to banning the GMO crop where the problem had been found. So essentially there isn't a real safety issue, and that's why the FDA has not ever wanted to require labeling.
And we're back, and you just saw two videos on Proposition 37. The first one was pro Prop 37, which would again mandate the labeling of genetically modified or genetically engineered food in California. And then we saw the no side, the no on 37, from, oddly enough, Green State TV, and I don't know who they are yet. And we saw a scientist from Davis talking about the safety. Well, in our first video, I'm sorry, my guest, let me do this first. My guest is Patti Bond. Thank you for being with us tonight.
My pleasure, thanks.
And you are active with, you tell me,
Okay,
I don't have it.
I'm a volunteer with GMO Free Santa Cruz, which is a grassroots organization that's been working hard to educate people about the GMO issue. And so we're in support of the state campaign, the California Right to Know campaign.
Oh, so the statewide campaign is called California Right to Know.
Right, and here locally it's the GMO Free Santa Cruz volunteers.
All right, great. So in the first video, we saw the very nicely done retro kind of commercial from Yes on 37. And they remind us about these former products that have been in our lives, like cigarettes, and then Agent Orange.
Right.
And how they were claimed to be harmless.
Right.
And now, and we just heard the scientist here from Davis talk about that. So one might say, well, if they're safe, then why should we label the food? Are these things safe?
Well, nobody can say they're safe. There have been no long-term studies, no long-term human health studies There's a big body of evidence about the damage to animals, and I can talk about that too. But in terms of human studies, what's happening, the FDA requires no health and safety studies for genetically engineered foods. They're relying on the word of the big genetically engineered food companies to make a statement whether they're safe or not. And as the video pointed out, Monsanto, who's the producer of Agent Orange, DDT, is saying, yes, our GM food, our genetically engineered food is safe. They have no evidence of that. We do know that some of the proteins that are produced through the genetic engineering process are known allergens, so we are seeing a lot of allergic problems. I know in the UK, when GM, genetically engineered soy, was introduced, soy allergies skyrocketed 50% soon after the product was introduced. So one of the reasons we need labeling is so health professionals can start studying the impact of genetically engineered foods on people. In terms of animals, there is a big body of knowledge right now. Genetically engineered foods causes very serious damage to animals' intestines, liver. There's a lot of problems with fertility and just general immune reactions. So there's enough concern now with health issues generally for living creatures for the American Academy of Environmental Medicine they're urging doctors very, very strongly to advise their patients to avoid food with genetically engineered ingredients. And just so that all the listeners understand, there's two things that the proposition would do. First of all, food that contains genetically engineered materials would have to be labeled. Right now, there's a law that certain ingredients have to be covered in a label, food sugar content, fat, vitamins, and that kind of thing. So food producers, food manufacturers would have to add just a few words to the label. They'd have 18 months to add that to the label. So, I mean, they're relabeling all the time, so there's no cost involved there. Secondly, very important, foods that contain genetically engineered ingredients can no longer be called natural. And this is so key because people need to understand that genetically engineered food, it's not natural. It happens in a laboratory. And they take a gene from a bacteria, plant, or animal and force it into the DNA of an entirely different species. So you can imagine taking a gene from a frog and forcing it into an azalea plant. I mean, it does not happen. It happens in a laboratory, and the actual process of genetic engineering causes a lot of mutation in the host body. So I think there's a lot of concern. So I think, again, we need the labeling so that people can start monitoring and studying the impact, the long-term impact on human health. And of course, along with the increase in genetically engineered crops is an increase in pesticide use. And I think everyone can agree that more and more pesticides on the earth is bad for the planet and bad for all living creatures.
Yeah, one of the famous products that's part of this whole debate is Monsanto's Roundup. Right. And they have, besides selling this chemical, which is a pesticide and herbicide, I believe, I don't know which, but herbicide, it's an herbicide. They have also developed Roundup Ready is their term, plants. Right. So the GMO plants are designed to withstand the effects of the Roundup. Right.
There's two kinds of genetically modified crops. One is you're describing, they can withstand any amount of weed killer. So what's happening now, the weeds are getting resistant to the plant, so they're having to apply more and more pesticide. Another kind of GM crop is a BT crop, and the plant itself is a pesticide. So if an animal bites a BT corn, their stomach bursts open and they die. So when we're eating products that are BT corn, for example, it makes you stop and kind of worry that those BT genes could be transferred into our bacterial gut and could continue to produce pesticides. So it's pretty scary.
I heard an argument or a discussion of this issue on KPFA radio the other day. I recommend KPFA to everyone. And there was a person representing Yes on 37, as you are, and an industry spokesman from the American Chemistry Council or something like that. And he said, you know, we don't need this. Everybody already knows that, for instance, that the vast majority of soybeans that are grown and consumed in this country are genetically modified, or GMOs. What do you, he said, we already know, we don't need the labeling. What do you say to that?
It's just not true. Americans are so in the dark about this. I mean, there are 50 countries now label GMOs, require GMO labeling. And so this is not a new thing. In fact, Prop 37 is very simple, straightforward, and common sense. We really need to know what's in our food. We need to know, 90% of Americans want to know that their food, that they're buying food that has genetically engineered ingredients in it. That's something that we've found through research. And the reason is people want to know what's in their food so they can make better decisions about what they eat and what they're serving their children. I think children, everyone would agree, are very susceptible to toxins and mutations in food, and I think we have to protect our own health and the health of our children.
Thank you. We're going to wrap it there. What's the, where can people get more information?
They can go to carightToknow.org, and that's the California Right to Know website.
All right, great. Thank you, Patti Bond with California Right to Know and GMO-free Santa Cruz.
Right. We're having a volunteer meeting Tuesday night at the Live Oak Grange at 7. If people would like to come, we'd love to have more people involved.
Okay, and I assume you have a local website.
They can just go to the CA Right to Know and get the location and the information.
Great. Thanks again for being with us.
My pleasure.
That's going to do it for us tonight. Thanks for joining us tonight on Voices from the Village. Thank you to our all-volunteer crew here at Voices from the Village. We can't do it without you. Thank you to Community Television. And we'll see you next time on Voices from the Village. Good night.
Paradise, put up a parking lot with a pink hotel, a boutique, and a swinging hot spot. Don't it always seem to go that you don't know what you've got till it's gone? They paved paradise, put up a parking lot. They took all the trees, put them in a tree museum. They charge the people $1.50 just to see them. Don't it always seem to go that you don't know what you've got till it's gone? They paved paradise, put up a parking lot. Hey, farmer, put away the DDT now. Give me spots on my apples, or leave me the birds and the bees. Don't it always seem to go that you don't know what you've got till it's... Big yellow taxi took away my old man. Don't it always seem to go that you don't know what you've got till it's gone? They paved paradise, put up a parking lot. I said, don't it always seem to go that you don't know what you've got till it's gone? They paved paradise, put up a parking lot. They paved